welcome to today's Smith in the World panel. I'm Shawna McCoy, and this is the fourth panel of the 2025 Smith in the World Conference Series, with future sessions featuring students in government, law and public policy, arts, media and communications, and health professions. So we welcome everyone joining us today, including students, prospective Smithies, faculty, staff, family and friends, supervisors, and colleagues. Thank you for joining us to hear from these outstanding students. All right, so the Smith in the World Conference celebrates students off-campus experiential learning, including internships, community service, research, or study abroad. Students reflect on how these experiences have impacted and enriched their academic and professional paths. Smith in the World is part of the college's spring showcases. Learn more on Smith's website, and the link, it will be or is already dropped in the chat. Okay, so our panelists today will give short presentations about their off-campus learning experiences, focusing on their projects, the impact these experiences had, and how Smith prepared them. And today's topic is education, nonprofit, and social impact. I am honored, more than honored, to introduce our panelists. We have Maggie Huang, class of 2027, Husna Sepehre Ahmadi, class of 2028, Nardelly Ferreira, class of 2025, Ada Comstock Scholar, and Kelly Tran, class of 2026. Today's session will be recorded, so we ask that the audience members remember to keep their microphones muted. Submit your questions in the chat tool. We will field questions at the end of all of the presentations. So with that, I will hand it over to our first panelist, Maggie Huang.
All right, I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Great. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah. Okay. So without further ado, thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Maggie Huang, and today I'm going to be talking about the work I did at the Collaborative for Educational Services last January 2024. So, like I said, my name is Maggie. I'm a sophomore, and I'm a government education major and community engagement and social change concentrator. I'm originally from Trumbull, Connecticut, and that's something that I thought was important to mention because I feel like being from Connecticut and growing up there is really what informed my passion for education policy in the first place. Connecticut has one of the highest educational disparities in the country, and I feel like it's very easy to notice growing up that where you're located and what your identity is has such a huge impact on the quality of the education you get. So something I'm very passionate about is education equity across identities. So because I have that passion for education policy, I decided to apply for the Mindich Fellowship in my first year of college. And that was an amazing decision. I learned so much from it, and I met so many amazing people through it. So what the Mindich Fellowship is basically is it's this 1 month long placement during January term. And I think it also runs during the summer. So if anyone's interested in that, that's also an option. And essentially what it does is it places students in various education placements. So that can include helping a classroom teacher or being in a policy placement like I was. And I know people that are doing speech therapy and administrative roles. So variety of different options you can choose from. It's an amazing program. It runs in this cohort style model. So in addition to the internship you're doing, you're meeting bi-weekly with students to reflect and talk with each other about what you're doing. So it's a really enriching experience. It operates on this mentor-mentee model. And my mentor, Gwen, is actually here today. So shout out Gwen. And you get to sit down with your mentor and talk about your goals for the internship. And yeah, so Gwen is a program evaluator and senior researcher at the collaborative. So to tell you a little about the collaborative. The Collaborative for Educational Services is a nonprofit founded in the 1970s. And I think it's the largest collaborative in the state of Massachusetts because it provides educational services and programming for the Department of Youth Services, which means it's a provider for incarcerated students and also for students in like mental health and hospital settings. And the office I interned at is actually right in Northampton. So I got to go in person every day, which was awesome. Oh, wait, let me go back. You guys need to see the cool animation. So I mainly worked on this one project during my time at the internship. And I worked on other things too, but this was like mainly what my day-to-day was about. So at the beginning of my internship, Gwen and I sat down and we talked about like what we wanted to focus on, like what we wanted to figure out and explore, I guess. So we basically just looked at this giant data set of post-secondary students in these programs. And we asked questions like, how does gender and race and immigration status and disability affect other things like MCAS scores or high school attainment or like even high school attainment type? So we pulled all that data from databases like Aspen and like the Department for Elementary and Secondary Education database. We did a lot of like cleanup with that. That's something that I learned a lot of, how to do like data cleanup. That was a very big part of this. And then we got specific with that data. We put together 2 topics into pivot tables, like how does gender compare to MCAS score, and how does race compare to like how does race compare to like the population over the years. So that is what we did. And at the end, it culminated into this presentation that I got to give to the Department of Youth Services team, which was awesome. So even though that was like the main part of the internship, I also had some amazing other experiences. And one of the things I think was most fulfilling to me is we actually got to visit one of the programs that the collaborative provides services to. And for me, I think this was particularly important because one thing that I think about with policy a lot is like, you can't just make decisions for a community. It has to be in like collaboration, and it has to be building on something that the community is already going through. So it's so crucial that policymakers and the people that are making the decisions are, you know, staying in contact and having conversations with the people that is impacting. So it was awesome to put a face to the names that I was like seeing on this massive data sheet. In the program we visited, I think I only had 2 students, but they were amazing to talk to, and they were very willing to, you know, tell me what they were learning and what they were doing. Another thing I got to do is we attended this conference in Worcester. It was an entire day conference, and some of the key things I remember us talking about is the use of AI in these programs. And to me, that was really interesting because it was really in response to this idea of like, obviously there is a national teacher shortage, but in incarcerated settings, that is significantly worse because you have teachers that are in charge of these large cohorts of students that span like ages and academic levels and like just everything. It's a big variety of students and only one teacher. So how do you provide individualized experiences to these students based on that? And they were looking at AI for that, this program called Magic School, I think. So that was really interesting. I also got to shadow a lot of WINS meetings. And one of the things that stood out to me was the civics education curriculums that they were reviewing and developing. To me, that's like a very personal thing. And it really like showed up in the places that I was like looking at. Like in the program, I could see firsthand how like the awesome civics curriculum was showing up. So that was amazing to learn. Lastly, I wanted to talk about what I learned throughout this program. So I consider myself like a very humanities-centered person. I I don't do a lot of work in like Excel and with like the quantitative side of research. So this was definitely a very big learning curve for me, but I really do believe it was incredible for like just like my experiences going forward. I have used the skills I've gained through this internship in classes and in other research I'm doing. So it was nice to step out of my comfort zone with that. When I first got to Smith, I didn't even know I was going to be involved in education. So being able to do this helped me gain that really deep appreciation for education. And like, I think like a week after this ended was when I decided to do the education major as a whole. Lastly, this was my first experience diving into the field of juvenile justice as a whole. And I think one of the things that my mentor Gwen said to me that really stepped out was this idea that like in an ideal world, the field of like providing services to incarcerated students just like wouldn't exist, because in an ideal world, like students just wouldn't be getting incarcerated. But like since it does, like how do you answer these questions? Like how do you give these students accurate diagnostics when they might not have the motivation to do tests? Or like how do you provide social emotional learning and teacher diversity when it's so understaffed in like the field of juvenile justice as a whole? So there's a few questions that I'm not going to be answering, but have made me consider, and I hope you guys consider too. But yeah, that concludes my presentation. Thank you everyone for listening. And if you want to reach out to me, ask any questions, talk more about this, please feel free to at my email. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Maggie, especially for highlighting how the Mendich Fellowship provides students with valuable opportunities to gain hands-on experience in the education sector. And also to hear from the people for whom you're making the policies for. That's huge. All right, so the next presentation is from Husna Sepehre Ahmadi.
Sorry, I was muted. Do you have my screen right?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Husna Sepehre Ahmadi, a sophomore originally from Afghanistan. I'm majoring in government and my concentration is community engagement and social change. If you had told me 10 months ago that I would be here on this beautiful but cold campus, engaging with so many distinguished students and alumni, it would have been unimaginable to me, completely unimaginable. Today, I want to talk about my life's journey and the work I have been doing that has brought me to this moment. I wonder if you will find my story equally unimaginable. I want you to imagine the moment I, along with so many others, have experienced and answer my questions to yourself, please. How would you feel if an explosion shook your apartment and wake you up in a panic in the morning? What would you feel if gunfire could be heard all around you? You and your family try to huddle behind the door, away from the windows in the hopes that no one would be hit by a bullet? How would you live when you are constantly at risk of being arrested in your own country? What feelings would you share with your family when you leave the house knowing that this could be your last conversation with them? How would you feel when you see that you are frequently punished simply for being a woman? What would you do when your basic rights, such as the right to education, the right to employment, the right to make decisions for yourself, are taken away from you? How would you feel when your identity is erased and you are known only by the name of your father, brother, husband, or uncle? Would you stay at home hopelessly, or would you strive hard, hopefully, for an uncertain, better future? These experiences left me with two options: to remain hopeful or to fall into hopelessness. I chose hope and started working hard not only for myself but for Afghan women's education as the assistant director of ASOP. I vividly pictured the day when I wanted to go to university to defend my senior undergraduate thesis, looking myself into the mirror to check if I covered my entire body well with black fabric from head to toe, my face also, by the Taliban's order. When I got to the door, armed Talib prevented me from entering the university. I insisted on my right to education, but they pointed their gun at me with an uh, unspoken desire to find an excuse for killing me. They told me that if I returned, it would result in my death. I also still remember the day when my 13-year-old sister came home early from school with tear-stained cheeks and puffy eyes. I could only hug her at that moment and told her, "It's going to be okay. I'm here for you. We can handle it together." The following afternoon, I just gathered our books and I stood by her bed. She woke up, and I said, "Let's follow our passion instead of embracing our griefs." And she was the first of many girls in need of motivation to pursue her education after the Taliban prohibited education. While teaching her, I began working on my own English. And one night, I came across a Facebook post about an online English class for summer. It was for 4 weeks and taught by a native speaker. I was very happy, and I stayed up late that night and applied. Eventually, I enrolled in that class, and this is that first class: 20 students, one teacher, and 300 in financial aid we had. And this class started, but after 10 months of the Taliban domination, on the first day of the class, June 21, 2022, I found a sense of worth within myself. Those joyful moments passed in the blink of an eye, and it was the day that the teacher was about to say goodbye, but my classmate and I urged him not to leave us alone, and he promised to continue teaching us. After studying for a few months, I realized that my English was good enough to teach others. So I expressed my desire to my teacher and asked him for my siblings, my classmates' siblings, and I started teaching. A few weeks later, my classmates also began seeking for mentees, and we established mentorship program. And she is one of my first mentees who was injured badly in one of the attacks that happened in one of the educational centers. And unfortunately, she lost her left eye and left ear. And I had meetings with my mentees in order to improve their English, not only their speaking, grammar, writing, reading comprehension, listening. And it was December 4, 2022. By my teacher's suggestion, we decided to create classes for Afghan women and girls. And we started with creating 2 basic English class. And this is the bedroom where I worked for more than 8 hours each day for 2 years, just inches away from a window that overlooked a Taliban's checkpoint, to provide online education for Afghan women, including my 13-year-old sister. Of course, every day was a battle against fear, knowing that if they discovered my identity, I could be arrested. And this is my 13-year-old sister who did this, and there was the Taliban checkpoint, and it scared me a lot. So after we make decision to create classes, I started working so hard. Some days I worked for 12 hours in a day. I created applications, reviewed applications, interviewed the students, enrolled them, interviewed teachers, recruited them, developed the curriculum, prepared slide, Google Classroom, syllabus, whatever was needed to be done, because our teachers were volunteer teachers and they were high school or university students. So in order to make teaching easier for them, I tried so hard to create everything. And over time, I also witnessed the smiles on the students' faces in the class and their growing confidence in sharing their opinions about the articles they were reading. And right now, we have many classes of basic English levels that starts from basic to advanced Duolingo prep course, mathematics, leadership, drawing, Latin, meditation, and STEM courses are coming soon in this spring. Of course, ASOP had a deep impact on our students' education, not only education, but also motivates them to start working with us and helping other students learn English. And we created a community. For now, over 1,000 students have completed at least one ASOP course, and 16 received a free Duolingo test, who scored between 100 and 140. And this is the scholarship that our alumni received in different countries across the globe, mostly United States of America. Of course, our volunteer also started creating chapters of ASOP in their universities, and these are our friends who help us to further our program. Our students usually share their ideas, thoughts, and feelings towards writing and drawing. And these are some of the samples of our students' drawing, which shows their deep emotions under the Taliban regime. So, as I mentioned before, our students started teaching one of our classes, like 26 ASAP alumni, but they also teach their siblings. I invite you to watch this video.
What is this? That's a door. What is this? It's a ball. What is this? It's a teddy bear. What is this? It's a book. And what is this? It's a cord.
So now this is me under the Taliban regime with no identity. And this is me again at Smith College, where I found my freedom. I'm deeply grateful to Smith College for welcoming me into their supportive and friendly campus. We are witnessing the freedom of those around me, and my own motivates me to work even harder to instill the same sense of worth and freedom in others I left behind in Afghanistan. The gunpoint of the Taliban actually was not the final chapter in my education journey. I found the strength to get back up and start over again and again. And besides learning to be a mentor, a teacher, a leader, academic program coordinator, and an assistant director, it taught me three other important things: how to turn my sorrows into ideas to create opportunities for growth. And while our sorrow may fade away or we get used to it, it changes the meaning of things in our lives, including our own sense of self. And I also learned to fix what's not working and treasure what's worth saving. I found my ikigai. I also I also was invited by different schools in the US, like Princeton University, Georgetown University, the State House of New Jersey, and School of Princeton, and so forth. And I talked about women's education under the Taliban regime and the program, I mean the nonprofit, where I'm the assistant director right now, and many other students, they started working with us voluntarily and started teaching one of our classes. And for now, we have 2 students who have been working with us during fall 2024 from Smith College, Winta and Margot. I'm so happy for their support. So that's ASAP, the project we started in December, on December 2022. Until now, we are continuing and helping women to pursue their education. Thank you.
Wow. We deeply, deeply appreciate the incredible work you're doing, and the work you've done in developing the mentoring program and the impactful programming that you've made to support these young women. So thank you, and thank you for this amazing presentation. I appreciate it. Our next speaker is going to be Nardelly Ferreira.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. Alrighty, is this working well? Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Nardelly Ferreira, and today I'm excited to share with you my internship experience with the Movimento dos Atingidos por Barragens, commonly known as MABI in Brazil. In English, it translates to the Movement of People Affected by Dams. My experience with MABI was an invaluable opportunity for personal and professional growth. So let me start by offering a brief overview of MABI. The organization traces its roots back to the late 1970s, when it initially arose in response to communities being forcibly displaced by large hydroelectric dam projects. In 1991, it evolved into a nationwide movement, adopting a unified platform, organizational strategies, and shared symbolism. Over the decades, MABI has grown into one of Brazil's foremost grassroots organizations, championing social and environmental justice. MABI's mission centers on empowering affected communities by mobilizing and organizing them at local, regional, and national levels. Through collective action, these communities can advocate for their rights, address common challenges, and advance policies or initiatives that promote a fair and inclusive energy model. Through its work, MABI aims to dismantle systemic injustices, fostering a more equitable and sustainable approach to energy production and resource management, while amplifying the voices of affected communities. So what led me to this internship? During the spring semester of 2024, I took a class in environmental economics where we discussed topics such as the economic causes of environmental degradation, market failures leading to environmental problems, and the development of policy solutions. For the final project, my group presented on coastal flooding in Maine, examining its effects on insurance and local economies. While we were working on the project, I started seeing devastating news from Brazil about the severe floods in Rio Grande do Sul. These floods that happened between late April to the end of May 2024, caused by an immense volume of rain linked to El Niño and intensified by climate change, severely impacted the state, displacing communities and causing widespread damage. And even now, almost a year later, we still see the aftermath. That connection between what I was studying and what was happening in my country made me want to do something about it. So being an atingida myself, someone who had first-hand experience with the economic and environmental effects of dam constructions on their community, I was already familiar with MABI and their commitment to advocating for affected communities and addressing the root causes of environmental injustices. I reached out to them to understand how they were supporting the affected populations and to explore how I could meaningfully contribute to their efforts. Together, we created an opportunity where I could experience firsthand the humanitarian work of preparing and delivering meals to affected families, participate in the movement's initiatives to mobilize the families in advocating for their rights, and engage in research on the economic impacts of the disaster. Now, turning to the humanitarian aspect of my internship, from May 3rd to October 12th, 2024, MABI, in partnership with labor unions, church leaders, and other social movements, led the organization of 5 solidarity kitchens across flood-affected regions of Rio Grande do Sul, including Porto Alegre, the capital, and Canoas, one of the most affected areas. During this period, these kitchens collectively provided around 160,000 hot meals, with 120,000 coming from Canoas alone. They also supported each other across regions, sharing volunteers and resources as conditions evolved daily. I was stationed at the Canoas kitchen. Over the 20 days I spent there, we produced approximately 950 meal boxes daily. I assisted in the kitchen by sorting beans, peeling potatoes, labeling meal boxes with the date and the time they were prepared, and working on the assembly line. As one of the few people with a driver license, I also helped by picking up supplies, delivering lunch boxes, and driving to meeting with the families. With a few days, my responsibilities expanded to include coordinating the inventory of donations, participating in and leading meetings with affected families, and helping coordinate efforts to rebuild homes and communities. This meant contributing to action plans, advocacy work, and broader political initiatives aimed at supporting recovery and ensuring accountability from authorities. Moving on to the research part, I began my research in Brazil, focusing on the economic impacts of the flooding, which later evolved into my practicum research project while studying abroad in Geneva. In this study, I analyzed the efficiency of aid distribution to flood-affected municipalities. While economic indicators did influence the allocation of resources, I found that factors like municipal unpreparedness also significantly shaped the final distribution of aid. A key discovery was that in order for a municipality to receive government aid, it had to formally declare a state of emergency or public calamity. Out of 497 municipalities, 444 filled those declarations, yet only 165 actually received the aid. Many of those that did manage to secure support did so in part because of MABI's effort in raising awareness among families about their right to this assistance. So this internship significantly impacted me on both personal and academic levels. Personally, working with flood-affected families taught me empathy and resilience in crisis situations, skills that go far beyond the classroom. I also improved important skills like public speaking and communication by leading meetings with families and stepping into leadership roles. I was also fortunate to meet incredible, compassionate individuals, some of whom are here today. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to work alongside such inspiring people. On the academic side, I got hands-on experience with regression analysis and data interpretation, which helped me better understand how to work with data and identify patterns. It was a great chance to connect what I've learned in class to real-world challenges. Finally, this experience reinforced my academic interests. I realized I want to continue researching and advocating for policies that reduce social inequality and promote sustainability. And I'm also happy to share that Maggie invited me to join them after graduation to continue building on the research and further contribute to their work. I want to thank you all for listening to my experiences. Work with Maggie was both a challenging humanitarian effort and a powerful learning experience. It showed me how social movements can shape public policy, ensuring that underrepresented communities can advocate for their rights. I'm excited to carry these lessons forward in my academic and professional journey. I've included my contact information in Maggie's website. Feel free to take a picture if you'd like, and I'll be here and happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, great. I'm excited to hear that this incredible organization invited you back to do this important research. A quick reminder, if you have any questions that you want to ask these amazing panelists, please put it in the chat because we have one more speaker. Our last speaker of the evening is Kelly Tran.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen and then we can go ahead and get started. Give me 1 second. Is everyone able to see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry, I can't see anyone right now. So a little bit about me. My name is Kelly Tran. I am a junior, class of 2026. I am double majoring in history and Spanish, particularly within history, a focus on the Americas. I am from Atlanta, Georgia. That is my hometown. And the internship that I did over the summer that I'll be talking about today is called Into the Fields, and it was facilitated by a nonprofit organization called Student Action with Farm Workers. So going into this internship, I had about 2 years of class at Smith, and I was doing a lot of work with like history and like values and lessons about immigration, labor, and gender. So I was wondering, how do I consolidate and facilitate these really big ideas and concepts that we are learning at Smith into the real world and into real meaningful action? And then the follow-up question to that was, because I've been doing a lot of work with studying marginalized histories like labor histories, immigration histories, border histories, gender, like what does, and things such as, I was thinking a lot about, okay, what have I learned from my classes? What have these social movements taught me? And I was wondering, what does building a career in life grounded in collective organizing and social movements actually look like in the real world? So these were my guiding questions about where I was going with this internship and like what I wanted my internship this past summer to look like. These questions led me to Student Action with Farm Workers. So Student Action with Farm Workers is a nonprofit organization based in North Carolina. They work predominantly with students from UNC Chapel Hill. That's just one of the places they recruit from a lot. But they conduct research to workers in migrant labor camps, welcoming them into communities and educating them about their rights. They collaborate with partners such as the Migrant Education Program to provide legal services, healthcare, and migrant education for those farm workers. And they also advocate for workers' rights and immigration reform through lobbying and provide a raising of consciousness through their work of community theater and participatory documentary projects that they facilitate every summer. So Student Action with Farm Workers was the organization that was facilitating my partnership with the Migrant Education Program, particularly in South Carolina. So I was meeting with people from North Carolina and my internship group through Student Action with Farm Workers, but the partner that I was assigned that was working with me worked with me in South Carolina through the migrant education program. And you might be wondering, okay, what is the migrant education program? So interestingly enough, the migrant education program is a federal program that is facilitated in all states for agricultural workers who and their children as well. The goal of the migrant education program is to ensure children who are moving across state lines and having their education interrupted by the work that agriculture, the seasonal work that agriculture necessitates, are being kept track of, and their education being kept track of as well. So that was some kind of like the baseline concept of why the migrant education program exists. So that was the organization that I was working with. These organizations were the organizations that I was working with. So I was really deeply entrenched in the farm worker movement specifically. So I was thinking of things like Dolores Huerta, Cesar Chavez, like Si Se Puede, like what, like these big kind of movements and ideas and facilitations of people and their stories were something that I was really like thinking about throughout this internship. What was the work we did through this migrant education program in South Carolina? So the migrant education program in South Carolina predominantly focuses on the center slide known as recruitment, where we were tasked with recruiting individuals under the age of 21 to basically fill out a form concerning their education levels and information so that the South Carolina Migrant Ed program could keep track of them and could enroll them in a variety of different programs. In order to get them to sign up, though, something that we learned that we had to kind of entice students in was through English classes. We would sign up a couple students, and if we would go to migrant labor camps, which were honestly in pretty rural areas of South Carolina due to the farmland. And then we would go try and find students under 21 who fit like the very arbitrary qualifications of this program. You were required not to finish high school, were required to be under 21, and things such as. And then if we would get students to sign up, we would teach a brief English class about topics that they were interested in, such as greetings. How do I find something in a Walmart? How do I order a hamburger? What are road signs? Things like that. So students could have that English class. And then we would send them off with like a backpack with like 2 bilingual guides so they could learn on their own, as well as getting them enrolled in the program so that their names were in the system. So that was the majority of the work that we did, was English classes and recruitment. And that first picture is me and my partner, Dani. She goes to Idaho State University. So there was also a lot of different universities participating in this. And then finally, one of the really unique things that SAF had us do was the documentary project. And SAF facilitates the documentary project every single summer. They do something new. A couple years ago, they did zines, if you know what that is. They did zines with the farm workers. But this year, we were asked to do interviews with farm workers so that these interviews could be turned into a podcast about their favorite dichos, which were their favorite sayings from home that give them, that are significant to them, that are meaningful to them, that get them through the day or remind them about who they are. So that was something that I really think influenced my experience with SAF, and my experience with MEP was doing these interviews with these farm workers and getting them to know them on a baseline level, getting to know their stories, their histories, how they got to the US, what they're doing here, and then also just learning about like what they go through and their struggles day to day. Isolation was a really, really, really common topic among the farm workers, how hot and hard their days were, because we're talking about the South Carolina heat in the middle of the summer picking watermelon. So they were talking about how excruciating some of the work was, how isolating a lot of the work was because they're living in rural areas without access to consistent transportation to get them out from where they're living. And also some people mentioned talking with just being with a lot of men and not being able to open up to each other a little bit because of the machismo culture and things like that. So it really gave us an inside look into what these farm workers were dealing with and really highlighting their stories in ways that I don't think would have been possible without doing the documentary project. So I learned a couple of different things throughout this internship. I learned that flexibility with the kinds of work that we did and when we did it was really essential to doing the work that we did, because Dani and I would work from about 4 p.m. to about 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. That was when our workday started. And we did Monday through Thursday. No, we did Saturday through Wednesday, because that was the time that the farm workers had off, was in the evenings and on the weekends. So that was kind of, we had to learn how to deal with that. So our schedule wasn't clear. I was doing a bunch of different work with a bunch of different age groups, because we also had to work with farm workers' children. So I was a babysitter, I was a chaperone for high school students, I was working with adult farm workers. So we did a very like broad variety of who we were working with as well, in their age groups and what they needed. I also learned to navigate the workplace and teamwork partnerships, because Dani and I were not only working together, we were living together, and we had to learn how to, communicate with each other. We were working super, super long hours together, and also something, and we were working super long hours with each other. We had to work through language barriers with each other to kind of get us where we needed to be with the farm workers. And finally, I was experiencing immersion within a very new environment and community in general. I was one of the only non-Latino students in the program. Specifically, there was another girl as well, and we were working with a lot of students who had parents who were farm workers. Students, or in terms of working with, I meant my other intern partners. A lot of them had parents and uncles and grandparents who were doing farm work. They went to a variety of different universities. They went to UNC Chapel Hill, Idaho State, Arizona State, the UCs, a lot of local public North Carolina schools as well. So I was learning to deal with a completely new environment that was honestly completely unfamiliar to me, and learning about this new community and my role in it, and how I would come in to support and what needed to be done in this space. So, reflections on my project and what I did. So you've heard I was doing a lot of different kinds of work with a lot of different kinds of people in a very different geographic region, a very different culture and things like that. And I think one of the main things that I was reflecting over this summer and throughout this semester at Smith was, God, things didn't feel like they were aligning. All the stuff that I was learning at Smith about these imperialism and borders and labor and justice just didn't feel like I could solve it through this program, through this migrant education program, through student action with farm workers. I was really frustrated with how these organizations that are set up to kind of try and solve and fix these problems weren't doing them on a broad, big policy scale and things like that. And that was the majority of my frustration throughout the summer, was I feel like I'm doing nothing. I feel like I'm putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole. What can I do? And then I realized that the world doesn't really work the way some of our Smith classes presented. We can't really solve everything by just learning about them in academics and not interacting with people's community. Because what I learned was a lot of people weren't really ready to face the problems that they had with indigenous groups in Mexico, for example, that they had severe prejudices against other indigenous farm workers, or people weren't ready to discuss how they were perpetuating their own systems of oppression and how gender wasn't talked about. People weren't ready for those things. And also how, you can't, all these big theory and academic and buzzwords couldn't be used to fix and solve these real world problems that people are dealing with, that people are more concerned about whether people need to figure out if they can put food on the table, first and foremost. People need to figure out if they can send money back. People need to figure out how to stop feeling so lonely and isolated. Policy solutions, as great as they might be, weren't really meant for a framework to solve loneliness. So that was something that I was realizing, which is some of the stuff that I had been learning in school wasn't going to solve the things that I was seeing in person, and other methodologies needed to be taken place. So in conclusion, it gave me a greater appreciation for all the work that SAF and MEP was doing, because they were connected with these communities. They were seeing these communities on a weekly basis. They were facilitating projects that could let them get their story out, that could let them talk about themselves and be something more than just a hand and a body that was working. So these are some examples right here in this slide of all the different projects that SAF has been doing. This blue one right here and this map right here, some of these examples of the zines that they were doing with farm workers through their documentary project, so that they could just talk about themselves and where they come from and their stories, so that, you know, someone is there to hear them and to listen to them. And that was one of the biggest things that I learned from my internship, was that sometimes the answer is not big policy solutions or rebellion or social movement. And sometimes the things that people need to get them to that point where they're ready to rebel, where they're ready to have justice for themselves, and when they feel supported enough to do those things, is to sit there and to be with them and to let them know that you are here. So yeah, that was basically what I did over the summer and what I learned.
Thank you so much. Your experience understanding the culture of the migrant farm workers and their families, along with your ability to meet them where they were, is an example for us all. So thank you so much for that. All right. We have a few questions. I know we're running low on time. We may go over just a bit. But one of the questions for all the presenters, I see myself. Okay.
Kelly,
Is-
it looks like
Kelly, are you still sharing your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I
I
am
see
so
myself
sorry.
talking.
How does one turn this off? Let's see.
There we go.
I found it.
Thank you.
Sorry.
There we go. Yeah, I was in high definition there. Okay, so a question for all presenters. What advice would you give others who wish to do work like yours? Maggie, you want to start us off?
Oh wait, sorry, my mic was weird. Yeah, I think one thing I would say to that question is, I think the first step is to really just get involved in your community. I think that's like one of the biggest things that has been in the background of like all the opportunities I've had to be able to participate in this work. Like, I think for me, it's not really about like seeking these opportunities, but like really getting to know other people's stories and like seeking out like what really makes people tick, what makes a community tick. And along the way, when you're doing that, I think you're just bound to find like organizations and people and topics that you want to learn about and get involved with. So yeah, get involved with community, organize, talk to other people that are doing the work that you're doing, learn about what came before you. Yeah.
Husna?
So what I would like to say others is to empower marginalized communities' voices. They can do it in different ways. Some does through drawing, some through writing, some through making people aware of the situation, and some through teaching, like Margot and Winto. They started teaching one of our classes in fall 2024, and they spent an hour in a week just to teach those women English and make them able to pursue their education online or apply to scholarships.
Kelly?
Yes. I think, sorry, my video is turned off. I don't know why I can't get it back on. I apologize. But one of the things that I would say that I would give my biggest advice on about this, and Shawna and I had talked about this when we were going through our session, is especially for Smithies, do the work that makes you so uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable every day of my internship. There was things that were being thrown at me that I've never been like a babysitter before. Like I've never done that. I've never chaperoned for high school students and then had to help facilitate their activities. Like, do the work that makes you uncomfortable. I learned my Spanish was, greatly improving. It wasn't at the level that I think I wanted to be at and I would have been comfortable being at to do the work that I was doing, but I had to do it anyway. I had to figure it out anyway. Like, I had to work with my partner and do this and like be uncomfortable. And I don't think I've ever learned more. I hated it in the moment at some points. I was like, I'm done. I give up. I don't ever want to learn. I don't want to see another word in Spanish ever again. But in retrospect, like I got to a point where I was like, okay, I am constantly uncomfortable. And that is okay because I'm learning and I'm learning in ways that I don't think like it was like the growth exponentially in everything that I did, from my academic, like Spanish, to communication, to like soft skills and leadership and learning how to like navigate certain social situations. Like that was something that I was like really, really, really appreciative of my internship, and that I would give to anyone who wants to do this work, is you have to be okay with being uncomfortable and learning how to cope with it.
That's right. Another thing, quick question, that was excellent. Quick question. Can you panelists remind us of what your majors are?
I am a government education double major and community engagement and social change concentrator.
I'm government, my major is government, concentration is community engagement and social change.
I am a history Spanish double major.
Wow, all these different majors making a difference in the world. I love it. I have one more question. I know we're going over time, but I have one more question. I know Maggie mentioned that her internship generated more questions to consider going forward. Did any of you experience this? And what questions came up for you during and after your experience?
Do you want me to answer that too? Or okay.
I'll start with Maggie. So.
Cool. I mean, like I said, all those questions I had at the end of my presentation, but throughout, I definitely was considering like, is nonprofit even the work for me? Like, is education itself the field I want to go into? And that's something I struggled with throughout, because like nonprofit is, it's not always like what you expect. It's not always about that. Like, you don't experience like the passion all the time. Like it can ebb and flow sometimes, but I think I am still like questioning, do I want to actually be a teacher first? Do I want to go straight into policy? But I think the resounding like answer to that question was like, yes, I do want to be involved in education, but I'm still questioning like in what degree, like to what sense. So I think those questions are good that that my internship brought up for me.
Kelly, Husna, did any questions come up for you all?
Could you repeat the question? I feel like it just went.
Totally. Yeah. So your experience, did it generate any questions like during or after for you?
Yes. I was just really confused about everything in my education at Smith. And I was like, what is the world? Like, what is going on? Like, how do I feel like I've accomplished something in a world in which there is so much work to be done in so many different ways? And like what felt fulfilling to me. And I think like I answered it like this semester, thankfully, in my collective organizing class. And like the thing that I learned is like, okay, the question was like, how do I fix things? Like, where do I go from here? What is the work that I want to engage in? And I think in my collective organizing class, I came to realize like, it's not going to be solved overnight. I'm not going to solve it overnight. My children are not going to solve it. My grandchildren might not even solve it. But you know what? How do we build institutions and legacies and communities and relationships with each other that allow us to build legacies and allow us to build something that can help us today, help people tomorrow, and then just in general, like hopefully help transform ourselves. So some of the things that like I think like the questions that I was realizing was, it takes a village. How do we get to build that village and then move from there?
Agreed. Husna?
So sometimes my fear actually brought lots of questions into my mind before starting working. My family and I were afraid of the Taliban. What happens if they recognize me? But how can I get rid of those feelings? I just encountered those feelings. And once I came to Smith College, English is not my first language, and there were people who were speaking so fast, and I was like trying to understand them. But what I did, I just put myself into that situation and encountered that fear in order to just get rid of it and overcome it. And after that, I can do whatever I want. That fear actually sometimes make me scared of things. But once I encounter that fear, everything gets okay for me. And I know what to do, how to do. If I don't know, I'll ask people around me and they start helping me. And Smith is such a supportive and friendly community. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much. I am so blessed for this. The panelists, you were amazing. And you taught us and so many different things, and your reflection was amazing. This concludes today's Smith in the World panel. Thank you so very much.